There.
Okay, great. Okay, so ADHD. The reason that I feel it is so important that you learn about ADHD is, first of all, there's a variety of statistics regarding how many people have ADHD. The absolute is at least 5 to 7%. But depending on the research, it can be higher. One of the reasons it's going higher is that the more we know about ADHD, the more people are catching it and starting to assess for it. And so as more people are assessed, the percentages go up. So for example, it used to be that all research was done on little boys who were hyperactive. And it wasn't until, gosh, I can't remember, maybe it was the 80s, that they were really getting in touch with the people that have ADHD but are not hyperactive or impulsive. They have more of the inattentive type. And so then girls obviously didn't get caught because 4 out of 5 of the girls who have ADHD have what we call the inattentive type of ADHD. And some boys have it as well, 1 out of 5. But the boys are more likely to have the hyperactive impulsive ADHD, or the combined type, which is both the inattentive type and the hyperactive impulsive type. And you will hear parents all the time say, oh no, my child doesn't have ADHD because they aren't hyper. You'll hear it from teachers. And this disability, though it is probably the most researched disability of all childhood problems, is the least understood by professionals, by parents, and by teachers. So children are not getting the help that they need. They're getting labeled as behavior problems, and if ADHD is not treated, there are lifelong problems for these people. So I am seeing people in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s. I even had a lady that was 70 years old. Major problems in every area of their life because they didn't learn how to work with the fact that they have ADHD. And what's so interesting is, for example, when I train teachers, they'll come in and say, oh, I don't even believe in that stuff. When they get done, they'll say, not only do they believe in it, but they'll say, I didn't realize it could be easy to teach in a way that works better for people with ADHD. Because if you don't understand how the brain works or is working differently, most teachers are teaching to kids that don't have ADHD. And the kids who have it are having a difficult time with learning, even though they're smart. So I have parents who are coming in with kids who are doing poorly in school, depending on the severity of the ADHD, because we have mild, moderate, and severe, will determine when they get brought in. And of course, the other thing is that people with ADHD are more likely than others to have comorbid conditions. You know what comorbid conditions are? Means more than one diagnosis. So, for example, they used to say 35, now they're saying up to 50% of the children who have ADHD have a learning disability as well. Now, learning disability are things like difficulty learning how to read, so that would be like dyslexia, difficulty with comprehension, thinking they can't remember what they read, difficulty with grammar, punctuation, spelling, those kinds of things. So English is often a difficult area for people with ADHD, but they're very creative. They write great stories. but they can't write a paper. They're all over the place. They have no sense of order and structure, and they have difficulty with, as I say, grammar and punctuation and so forth. Also, they could have a math disability, a difficulty learning math. So I want you to think about today, as I talk to you about all the problems that are associated with ADHD, then if you think about that for a child, on top of the ADHD. Now, also, there's a high prevalence of depression and anxiety amongst children with ADHD. And if you think about it, when you understand they have a problem that's not being diagnosed and it's being mislabeled, the child becomes very discouraged. They become anxious because every day when they go to school, they know they're going to get in trouble for something and they don't know how to fix it. And nobody's helping them. They also get depressed for the very same reasons. The statistics suggest that about, I think it's 20% of those with ADHD end up with a serious depression. But anybody that I see in adolescence, typically they will have at least dysthymia, which is a mild depression. And it's all related to their discouragement. And one of the interesting things is if you ask the family, they'll say, yeah, but my child seems depressed. You say, well, how are they in the how is this child in the summertime? And they'll think about it and say, oh, my child isn't depressed in the summertime, not even when they start school. But after about a month of school, for the rest of the year, the child is depressed. Well, that's a situational depression because the child is becoming discouraged. They start out, ADHD people are very resilient. Give them a break and they will start all over. And these kids will say, oh, this year I'm going to do better. I'm going to really try hard. I know I'm going to do better this year. I want to do better. And they will try so hard the first few weeks of school, but they just can't hold on to it because it's like swimming upstream against the current for them. What's interesting about ADHD, if you ask them about like 3 wishes, one of their wishes would be to do better in school. A lot of times they get mislabeled as oppositional defiant. Oppositional defiant kid, give them 3 wishes, you'd say, don't go to school, get my way, you know, that kind of thing. But a lot of these children get another diagnosis of oppositional defiance when they hit adolescence. And the reason is that they get so discouraged and nobody's helping them. They finally get mad. They're mad at their parents, they're mad at their teachers, they're mad at life because nothing gets better and they keep getting blamed and they're looking forward to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 more years of this. And they just want to get out of there. They just want to get out of school. They don't care. They'll skip school, they'll use drugs, they'll be defiant, whatever they need to do, because they just have had it. So they become oppositional defiant. There's a percentage of those kids who become conduct disordered. Now I want to differentiate between oppositional defiance with ADHD and oppositional defiance, and the same with conduct disorder. Truly oppositional defiant kids will have been oppositional defiant since at least the age of 2. The parent would say, my child's been arguing with me since they were 2 years old. And you will see a pattern of the parent giving in. It worked, so they continue to use it. What I see in oppositional defiant ADHD kids, if you ask the parents to bring in all the report cards, and I often recommend that you do that because it really gives you, not for the grades, but for the comments by the teachers, you start to see the patterns. And what you will usually see in these kids is when they started out in school, they were well behaved, the teachers liked them. They had some challenges, but the teacher was able to work with the child, figure out their learning style, and make it work. But when they hit middle school, teachers no longer teach the child, they teach the subject, and they have 150 kids. So they don't know anything about learning styles, they're just trying to teach a subject. And the kids now have 7 classes, 7 books, 7 homework assignments. They're supposed to keep track of all this stuff, and teachers are lecturing a lot. And these kids just start going down the tubes. So I often see parents bringing their kids in anywhere from the beginning of middle school through high school with all kinds of problems, which we'll talk about in a little while. But these kids get discouraged. The demands on them are in areas of weakness for them, and nobody is helping them to compensate for the weaknesses. You know, Adler always said it's not what happens to you, it's how you deal with it. But what if nobody gives you the tools to deal with it? That's what's happening to ADHD people. These kids, when I see them in my office, and adults too, they'll be sitting in their chair like this. Have you ever seen teenagers like this? Mm-hmm. By the time I get through talking to them about ADHD, and I do it in a positive, encouraging way, and I help them to see that we can fix this, they're sitting up in their seats and they are engaged. I went to an IEP meeting with a teenager who was very bright. He was flunking 3 classes and had A's in 2. And how many of you have ever been to an IEP meeting? Well, they went around the room and each teacher had something to say. Well, obviously they were all taught you have to say something nice about this kid. So they'd say one statement, you know, I really like Johnny, and then they would proceed to tell what he was doing wrong, right? They get all through going around and saying what he's doing wrong and that he is very smart. That was one of the things he said. We know Johnny is very smart. He's very capable. And he's getting A's in 2 subjects. So they get all through and they say, so can we all agree that what needs to happen here is Johnny needs to buckle down and do his work for these other classes. And I said, well, wait a minute. Before we decide what to do about this, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. I'd say, okay, he's getting an A in this class. Would you tell me something about the teaching style of the teacher in this class? And they said, well, that teacher does a lot of projects, uses videos, engages the students, has them work on projects together. Okay, that's very interesting. Then I asked about the other A teacher. Same answer. I said, okay, now here's the one where he gets an F. Tell me about how the teacher, what's the teaching style for this teacher? Well, basically that teacher lectures. Oh, okay. Now tell me about the other F. Well, basically that teacher lectures too. What about the third F? What about that teacher's teachings? Well, that teacher lectures. Now, I said, well, now let's just think about this. Why do you think he's getting A's in all the classes where the teachers are using projects and videos and all this stuff, and F's in the classes where the teacher's lecturing? It's like, oh, we never thought about that. So then I proceed to teach the teachers. So this child with ADHD is a visual, hands-on learner. That's the way he learns. He cannot learn auditorily. Can't. Not won't, can't. Cannot learn auditorily. And so he gets A's in the classes where they teach to his learning style and F's in the classes where they teach in a way that he can't learn. And I said, yes, he's a very bright person, but he has to learn in a way that he can learn, and strategies have to be used that help him to learn visually and hands-on. This kid, who's very smart, 16 years old, I mean, there are like, what, 8, 9 people around the table, right? The teachers, the vice principal, the social worker, you know, the special ed teacher, just surrounded by all these people. And he looks at them all and he said, I want all of you to know that this is the first person in my entire life that understands what it's like to be me. And that is typical. I mean, you know, it's sad. These kids, when somebody finally understands and doesn't blame them and says, let's find a way for you to work with this, they get so excited and they're cooperative. They want the help. They're just so discouraged they've wanted to give up. And they're in goal 4. You know, display of inadequacy. They've just given up on themselves and everybody else. Now, you take these kids who didn't get help and you take them into adulthood. Now you look at the 5 tasks and you will find that they're having problems in just about every one of them throughout their lives. And they're underachievers throughout their lives. You will hear them say, I have these wonderful ideas, I have great goals, I know I'm smart, I never get there. So it's vitally important that at the very least you know how to identify the symptoms of ADHD. If you want to have a specialty in ADHD, I strongly recommend it because a large number of the population that end up in therapy have ADHD, and the spouses that don't have it are ticked. And their kids probably have it too because it is inherited. It's a genetic disorder. They have found, they've begun to find the genes involved. They've identified 2 or 3 of them. They think there are going to be clusters of them now that they've done the gene studies. So it's very common to find that 1 or 2 of the kids have ADHD, and when you start to screen for the ADHD, one of the parents starts saying, oh my gosh, that sounds like me. Oh my gosh, that sounds like me. Oh my gosh, that's the way I was when I was in school. And so it's so vitally important that you understand and know these things, and that you can, at the very least, refer them. Also, kids who have not been diagnosed are very high risk for chemical dependency, getting in trouble with the law. I mentioned conduct disorder. Truly conduct disorder kids are breaking the laws, breaking the rules when they're grade school age. ADHD kids break the laws for a reason. Stealing to get drugs, for example. Skipping school. Getting tickets, driving, because they're distracted. So then they drive without a license. You know, there are all kinds of things that happen that can then get them the label of conduct disorder, but it's like progressive. Things have gone from bad to worse. And if you talk to people, they're beginning to become more well-informed, the people who are working in treatment centers. You know, it used to be, they said, it's like 40% of the people that are in treatment have ADHD. Well, 40% were diagnosed. And the more people that work in treatment programs understand ADHD, then they start saying, and I've had them in my classes, they'll say, holy cow, I bet you 80% of the people in my program have ADHD. Because when you can't solve a problem, it goes from bad to worse, and you feel lousy, you don't fit in, you don't belong, you don't feel significant or worthwhile, you want to escape from this painful life that you're experiencing, it's very common for them to get into drug use. And if they experiment with drugs, especially speed is a stimulant. What happens when they try speed is they discover, wow, I can focus, I can pay attention. But unfortunately, they self-medicate. They think, oh, if 1 is good, I bet you 4 would really be good. And then they get addicted. We don't see kids who are on stimulant medication getting addicted. It's the ones that have not been treated and did not get medication, then end up addicted.
Is there any compulsive behavior with ADHD?
There can be. That's another comorbid disorder that sometimes comes along with it. I always say a little obsessive compulsive in an ADHD person is a good thing. Because, and we're going to talk about, and we can move to that now, the what we call executive function problems with ADHD. And some of those have to do with organizing and managing their stuff. But an OCD person will use that OCD to keep order. And that helps them with their ADHD. So a little of that can be good. Now that's not like washing your hands 9 times. This is obsessive behavior where they want to do things the same each time, okay? So a person with ADHD and OCD would have a certain place for everything. And they always put it in that place. And if you move it, they freak out. And the reason they freak out is they know if it's not there, they won't know where it is. So having a system like that, even though it's going overboard, can be helpful to a person with ADHD. So if you want to turn, well, there's something called Brown's Model of Executive Functions. And it's on my page 90, but
Yes, 90.
okay. Now, first of all, I want to tell you that it's only in the past 10 years that executive function problems have been discovered as really the core problem of ADHD. You've all heard about attention problems, right? You've all heard about hyperactive. You've all heard about impulsive. And if you go to the DSM-4, they break it down that way. They have 3 types of ADHD. The inattentive type, that's what we used to call ADD. Then they have the hyperactive impulsive type. That's kids are hyper and they blurt things out or they act before they think. So we call that OTM, on the mind, out the mouth, that fast. Or they do something impulsively and sometimes it endangers other people. They're the kid that will jump off the roof, you know, just because they think it would be fun. And they don't think about, gee, I could get hurt. And then there's the combined type, which is both the inattentive type and the hyperactive impulsive type. Now, the inattentive type, and I should define that for you first, the inattentive type, and as I say, it's more often in girls. These are people who have a hyperactive brain, but it's not a hyperactive body. So their mind is jumping from one thing to another. They can't keep it on track. So for example, if I were their teacher and I said, today we're going to talk about the history of the state of Florida, in the mind of the ADHD, inattentive type, they think in their head, oh, we went to Florida last Christmas. Oh, it was so fun to go to Disney World. Oh, I wonder when Valley Fair is opening. I should ask Mom when I get home today. It would be fun if I could take my friend and go to Valley Fair this weekend. And then the teacher is saying, any questions? Well, what kid is going to raise their hand and say, would you please repeat the last 5 minutes? Now, this is not on purpose. It just happens. How many of you here have driven home and pulled into your driveway and couldn't remember how you got there? Okay, that's an ADHD moment. What if it was happening to you 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times a day when you were supposed to be paying attention in class right here? What if every 4 or 5 minutes something triggered something and you were off and thinking about something else? Wouldn't it be hard to learn? So, the inattentive type, the mind wanders. They have trouble staying on task. They have trouble focusing. Everything becomes a distraction. So if they're sitting in class and somebody's playing with their pencil next to them, they get distracted by the person that's doing this. that kind of thing. So, distraction is a big problem, but it's a neurological problem. The brain has difficulty blending out what's not important and just focusing on what is important. Okay? So, if they can't stay on task, they have a heck of a time getting things done, right? So they can act like they're spacey, they can act uninterested, they can appear to be underachievers. ADD kids are often labeled as underachievers. They just need to try harder. They also have problems with organizing, managing their stuff, keeping track of things, you know, misplacing things, losing things, all that kind of thing. So that's inattentive type. Then the hyperactive impulsive is pretty easy, at least in childhood, because they can't sit still in their seats when they're in grade school. As they get into junior high and high school, what I say is there's always some body part that's moving. So they're tapping their pencil, or they cross their legs and their foot's going, or they're playing with something while they're listening. There's always some body part working. And they're impulsive, so whatever they think comes out of their mouth. So just think about somebody you work with, maybe it was a boss, maybe it was a colleague, and you think about those nasty things you thought about them. Well, when an ADHD person thinks, the governor in the brain is slow to kick in, and so they blurt it out. So you can imagine how that affects relationships.
Well, they process out here instead of in here. Like you're going through all the steps inside.
That's right.
And they're out here doing it.
That's right.
Driving me crazy.
Internal processing problem.
Oh,
Yes. Yeah.
What's the bottom line? It's
Yes,
here.
exactly. So they will, it's like they're solving a problem
Out.
only verbally.
Right.
Is another way, as Nancy says. But also, if they see you, let's say they see their boss doing something that they think is dumb. They just blurt out, that's dumb. And then they realize after, gosh, that was my boss, I shouldn't have said that. But it's too late, already said it. So they lose friends, they get in trouble with their spouses, their kids, everybody, with this impulsive, blurting out kind of thing.
So can their kids learn that from them? And then
Sure,
and
they
not,
can also-
and not be ADHD,
Yes.
but just learn that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'll give you an example. I have a guy that I saw in my office, and somebody told him they thought he was ADHD because he wasn't paying attention. But when we got taking family history, and he was incongruent. When he would be saying something, he would be agreeing about something, he'd do this. And when he was disagreeing about something, he'd do this. Isn't that odd? But it turns out his mother was, I don't have a diagnosis on her, but she really had some comorbid conditions. And she was very incongruent. Now, she was saying yes when she meant no. But you know, if people say yes and they really mean no, they do this. Have you ever heard these people that read people's body language? And they do this on TV. They'll take the President of the United States, when he says something, was he telling the truth, was he being honest? Watch the head movement. You know, and they'll say, well, he was saying, I agree with that, but his head was going like this. And this is what his mother would do. She would say one thing, but she really thought something else, and so her head would go one way. Well, he learned that when you say yes, you're supposed to do this, and when you say no, you're supposed to do this. And his wife was confused.
Yeah, understandably.
Yes. And she'd say, wait a minute, you just said you'd do that, but you shook your head no. And he'd say, I did. And she said, so you don't want to do it? And he'd say, yes, I do. You know, and so he got labeled, maybe he's ADHD. The other thing was, he's a pilot. And his wife would say, you're not paying attention to me. And he'd say, she's right. He'd say, you know, I'm all over the place. And I said, I had to determine whether this was, you know, you can have a degree of a problem, but it has to reach a certain degree before you can diagnose it as ADHD. Well, he didn't have any problems with organization, time management, or the other executive problems that I'm gonna mention here. Just staying focused when his wife talked to him. Well, guess what his job, well, you won't be able to guess what his job was. His job is he's a pilot. Well, when you're flying a plane, do you suppose you're just gonna look here? No. As a pilot, he's gotta scan the horizon all the time. So what does he do when he's talking to his wife? He's scanning the horizon. All he needed to know was you're scanning the horizon. You have to consciously do eye contact with your wife, face her, and have eye contact, and you won't have a problem. Came back in a week and said, you're right. I just have to stand in front of my wife and just look at her when she's talking to me, and I don't have this problem, and she's not complaining. So sometimes there are other reasons. Sometimes people will have ADHD symptoms because their parents are going through divorce, or they're being abused, or whatever. So it's very challenging to pin down a diagnosis, so the more you know about ADHD, the better. Now with ADHD, what we know is those symptoms have been there throughout their life. They just didn't start when they were 10. But they can get worse depending on the situation. So in middle school and junior high, they'll get worse because the demands that are made on these kids in areas that they have difficulty with increase. You have a question?
Well, if I could just back up a minute before I lose it, so if you don't mind. You had said something about with ADHD kids, if it's not, like the OCD part about if it's not kept in the same place, they won't know where it is. Is it then better for them if you're a teacher or a parent or whatever, to keep it in that same place so that they always know where it is? Or is it better to try to teach them to do it a different way? Because I actually worked in a school where I struggled with this because I saw the teacher saying, she wants this to be here all the time and she doesn't get to have her way. So we're gonna teach her that it's gonna be over here, and tomorrow it might be over here, but she has to learn that. And it even confused me.
Well, here's the rule, and you're not talking about strategies. We use strategies in areas where they're having difficulty. It's like in school, teachers don't want kids to chew gum. Well, if it's not hurting anything, and now they've discovered that chewing gum helps people think. Did you know that?
It reduces stress.
And I mean, they were just going on and on about kids chewing gum. So the point is where they're keeping their water important? Is it interfering with their ability to learn? Teachers sometimes focus on things that really don't matter.
Right.
But if they need that structure in order to be able to do it, then even if they're a little resistant at first, we have to push them into using that habit because it helps them. So this is what I mean by once you understand ADHD, then you can teach kids and parents and spouses, everybody, strategies that help them to compensate. So as Adler would say, we don't allow them to use this as an excuse, it's an explanation. But then we have to help them come up with ways to compensate for the fact they have this problem.
So it's like, we don't try to change them necessarily, we help them come strategies to fit into the existing structure.
That's right. Teach them a way to do it that works better. A way to do it. Not, you've got to be different. You've got to use a way that may be different than other kids but works for you. And don't we all have some of those things? We learn certain tactics that work better for us. Maybe other people don't do it, but it works for us, so we do it. But I discovered when I was in my 30s that I had ADHD and a learning disability. And over the years, I developed strategies, but boy, life would have been so much easier if I'd learned them early and could have used them all the way through school. I would have done a lot better in school. But many do not recognize, and I don't blame teachers, they are not trained in how to identify ADHD, nor are they trained in the strategies that work to help these kids, nor are parents. So I'm not blaming people, it's a lack of education. And it's pervasive. I mean, you name it, doctors, social workers, therapists, chemical dependency treatment people, parents, grandparents, you name it, uneducated about this. And they hear a little bit on TV, and of course it's always the sensational stuff, and then they think it's baloney.
Have you worked with people who have stumbled upon solutions or
Oh,
who
yeah.
achieve success, and then you start asking them and they've come up with ways?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And some of the ideas that I use are things I've learned from my clients, that they've come up with great ideas, and then you add that to your mix of ideas that you pass along. You know, because, yeah, some of them are really good at coming up with strategies. In fact, I have a project planner sheet that I use, and I had a client who improved on my project planner sheet and gave it to me. You know, what a deal. So, you know, they can be very helpful in helping you with additional strategies.
And I had a question, so what Cindy was saying about the teacher, I didn't quite understand moving the water bottle around.
Well, because the student had to have, it wasn't necessarily a water bottle, but she had to have these things there. She also had Down syndrome, you know, and so she had to have, and she had OCD, and she had to have something in its place all the time. Well, I think the OCD piece of it and the ADHD piece of it was driving the teacher nuts, frankly. And so she said, you know, we're gonna break this habit of hers.
Exactly.
That's for the
And we're
teacher,
gonna-
not for the student.
That's right, and you
Right.
know, you're gonna see that. You're gonna see that. And again, I'm not trying to blame the teacher, but because they don't understand the difficulty, they'll be like this. With my son, I didn't know he had ADHD, but they put him at a table with 3 kids on a side. And this is like in first grade, and the teacher's saying, well, you know, little Mikey, he's always talking to his neighbor, you know, he sees something over here and then he starts talking to him. And so to punish him, she got the janitor to bring in his individual desk, and when he started doing that, he had to go sit in that desk. Well, guess what?
It worked better.
He wanted to stay there. He liked it better. And you know what the teacher said? Oh, we can't do that. I said, why not? If it works better. Well, he's gotta be able to socialize with other children. I said, he's never had a problem with socialization. He's got more than enough socialization. You know, he needs to be able to learn. You know, but the teacher was just so determined that this is the way we do it. It's a very left brain type teacher. We always do it the same way, and I don't vary, you know, kind of thing. But it's interesting, these kids oftentimes know what would work better for them, and the teachers won't let them do it. Some kids can listen better if they're doing something with their hands. And then the teacher gets upset because they're doing something with their hands and makes them put it down. Well, then they're trying to keep their body still. They have to think about that the whole time. They can't think about what they're learning. And, you know, so teachers sometimes assume that this is a behavior and a misbehavior, when actually it's a strategy, but the kids can't explain that. They don't even know the word strategy or that it is a strategy. They just do it because it works. You know, some kids can learn better if they pace, if they're walking. If you do therapy with these hyperactive kids, you get a lot more out of them if you go for a walk
Or
and
even
talk
some
to
kids
them.
with autism, high functioning autism, they'll let them go in the hallway and just let them pace. So they get their minute and then they come back and they're fine.
Sure.
But she knows when she was gonna go, so.
Exactly, you know? So, knowing the strategies changes things for these kids, and changes things for the parents and the teachers. So, with that, I want you to look at this Brown's model. This is so important, and you should have copies of this, and you should share it with teachers, parents, everybody, because this explains executive functions. And people with ADHD have problems in all these areas. So if you look at the bottom, the numbered, they have trouble with activation, they have trouble with focusing, they have trouble with effort, they have trouble with emotion, they have trouble with memory, they have trouble with action. Well, they're gonna have a lot of problems, right? Unless we get a way to help them. So if you look under activation, they don't have a clue about how to organize, how to plan, how to prioritize, how to get things ready to do the job. So they don't start. They don't have a clue, okay? So that's a huge problem. Think of how, planning is important in life, right? And organizing. They can't keep track of stuff, they lose, they misplace. Look at their desk, their locker. If it's a woman, her home. If it's a man, his office, or their car, disaster. Garage, disaster. I always say, show me a garage that no cars have ever been in, and I'll show you somebody in the family with ADHD. Because they can't organize the garage, and they can't organize things, and they just keep putting more and more stuff in the garage, and it fills up with stuff, and they never use the garage. Okay, then focusing. People with ADHD, first of all, have difficulty focusing to begin with. Once they focus, they have trouble staying focused. They get distracted with thoughts or by things. They have trouble shifting focus. So if they're doing something and you want them to stop and do something else, they have trouble shifting. Children with ADHD have a very difficult time with transitions, because when you say stop, now we're going to do this, they can't handle that. But there are strategies that we can use then. Okay? Then regulating alertness. Typically what they say is people's alertness, it'll go up and they'll stay like this for about 20 to 40 minutes and then it starts to go up. With ADHD people, it's like this. Alertness is up and down and up and down and up and down. And of course, every time it's down, they're missing something. Also, there's a processing speed problem for a lot of people with ADHD, which means that if you're giving instruction and there's 4 steps, you give them step 1, and then you go on to step 2. The ADHD person is still focused, trying to figure out step 1. So then you go on to step 3 and they check back in and they've totally missed step 2, so step 3 doesn't make any sense. So they're slower in process. They're just as smart. It's just it takes them longer to process through what is being taught. So that's another problem. Then, emotion. Because the governor of the brain is slow to kick in, when something happens, their emotions kick in before their brain has a chance to govern their behavior or evaluate and figure it out. As little kids, you say, I want you to put away your toys, and the ADHD child will say, no, and then they'll think about it a second, and then they'll say, yes, especially if it's something they want. Do you want a piece of candy? No. Then they stop and they think, and they say, yes. That's what the governor hasn't picked up. They haven't had a chance to process. They've gone straight to their limbic brain instead of the thinking part of their brain, because the thinking part of the brain is slow, and that's why they give stimulants to people with ADHD. It stimulates the thinking part of the brain so it kicks in more quickly, and they can think through things before they speak, before they act. They can stay on track and so forth. So and ADHD kids are the most sensitive kids, and so they are more affected by things. So when they do react, they tend to react more than another child would. They're hurt more, they're angry more, because things affect them more deeply. And when they happen to got a governor or a way to think things through, then they emote a bit too much and they get in trouble. And they don't have a way, unless you teach them a way. There are strategies where you can teach them that they can work on that. Then the memory, and this is huge. Basically, people with ADHD have extremely poor working memory. Working memory is memory right now. Being able to listen and take in what I'm saying, and if I say one thing and add another thing, you're able to hold in the previous thought, bring in the new thought, put them together. ADHD have already lost the first thought. Second thought comes in, they can't figure out, well, what do you do with that kind of thing. But they have extremely good long-term memory. So they are, once it's in their long-term memory, they're phenomenal. So one of our strategies we use is in areas where they have difficulty, we try to come up with a strategy that will get that strategy into long-term memory, become a habit, and that will help them through. Okay? So, not only do they have a poor working memory, but it is the most poor, in most cases, with auditory. Now you think of parents, how do they train their children? Yeah, they talk to them. And these little kids, sometimes they'll even do this. Because their brain gets flooded from hearing auditory and they can't keep up with it, they can't process it. And so parents get frustrated because the kid's not doing what they want them to do. But they're using a way that the kid can't do it. Same with teachers. And so we have to help people understand that if they really want this to be remembered, there has to be another way besides auditory. And of course, if you can't remember it, you're not going to recall it later. And ADHD kids tend to live in the moment. Yesterday's gone, tomorrow hasn't come yet. They also can't connect similar things. So if yesterday you say, don't run in the dining room, today they'll run in the living room. And they'll say, I told you not to run in the house. And the kid will say, no, you told me not to run in the dining room. And I'm not running in the dining room. They don't get it, that if you tell them not to run in one place, it really means don't run around here at all. They don't get that connection. And so they'll do the same thing, only in a different venue, if you will. And then self-regulation. Well, if they haven't got that governor going, they have trouble regulating their thoughts and their actions. As you can imagine, this is going to be a major problem in school. And more so, if you look at these things that they have to be able to do, think about how things progress in school. One thing when you're in grade school, but when you hit middle school, you've got 7 classes, 7 teachers, 7 assignments, 7 books. You've got to keep all this stuff organized. You've got to get to the next class on time. How are you going to get to your locker? Remember the locker combination. Not get distracted by somebody saying hi to you, so you have to do the combination 3 times. And then if you get late to the next class, you're in trouble. So these kids will carry 40 pounds of books around all day long because they won't go to their locker. That's a strategy that they learn. That I can't go to my locker or I'm going to be late to the next class.
Well, the locker's packed with stuff too.
It's packed with stuff,
It's a
totally
mess,
disorganized,
yes.
everything
Yeah.
falls out when they open it.
Indeed.
Have trouble finding things, they have old assignments that never got turned in, etc.
Don't you
Okay?
think it's hard for these kids too, just from the standpoint that they don't look like they have a disability? You see what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so
I
then
say if
people
they
see
could
it
have a
as
sling
behavior.
on their arm, they'd be treated differently.
Exactly, and so
Yeah.
then the problem is they don't look it,
Yep.
and so then
It's a
they
hidden
treat it as
disability.
behavior. Yeah.
It's a hidden disability. And that's a, you know, if they could wear a sign, you know. But then, you know, parents get scared about letting people
Labels.
know that they have a disability because then they think they're gonna be discriminated against. You know, so it's balancing this out. If they don't know, they can't help them. If they do know, you're taking the chance that if you get the teacher who doesn't believe in this stuff, you know, this is why we have to get everybody educated, everybody trained. Okay? We're gonna take a break, and then I'm gonna talk about strategy, you know, in a brief way, the kinds of strategies we try to help families with, and then I'm gonna give you a situation where you're gonna work with somebody with ADHD. Okay? All right, so take a break. I'll see you in 15 minutes. Oh, and those of you who weren't here right at the beginning, I handed out 100 ways to say that good that I found. Who did not get one? Somebody over here. You're welcome.
There.
Those are to give parents to help encourage their kids.
Yeah.
Together for a big part of the night. No, in a therapy session.
Because I think my husband is, but we went through an assessment. I did it, and then I went through with Dale. I'm sure
I
you
think I was the client. Yeah, ask someone else.
yesterday was.
I don't even remember.
We had to get the dog and move.
Oh, great.
Oh, that's right.
Because everything wasn't as.
No, not in front of the
mapped
class,
out.
like we'd all split up.
Oh,
Yeah.
because he had it in his head.
Sections.
That's what I was like, how he's old. It doesn't have.
Oh, and then
We accidentally ran by the archery post and these, all these shots were coming.
And then we had to use.
But he does like two, not as
We had to
extreme, my gosh. But she's
We had
like,
to
she's
use
like,
a couple of ways to build out the relationship
do?
between child and father, and then another one to eliminate the behavior.
People are really straight.
So it was recommendations for parents to manage behavior and
And all that on top of it.
there might have been one other page in there that we were working with, but get notes from someone else, because mine
Oh, sure. Wow.
she does,
Well,
she's very
well,
well.
She's
She's
very
very
readable
readable.
Anything.
at that.
Yeah, it
You know,
goes, it goes to the top.
I mean, obviously you.
Well, and I write down more than I
You
need
some
to.
need.
No,
Alright,
it's good.
thanks.
They would
Yeah,
have
so
probably,
there's- and my sister and I
told them
were
where to go.
very years.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they would have gotten labeled a behavior
And
problem.
stuff, and so then it's really.
Because of the way somebody treated them and they
It's
reacted.
obvious you have to have a family.
You know?
She's-
So oftentimes when I see kids.
So she finds all the negative things that could happen.
It's their behavior problem.
All the
So then you don't,
I
I
start
said,
talking
you
to
don't
these
need
kids
to
and I
do this.
discover,
I
you
told
know what?
we need to write
This is the
this.
same reaction to an
This
insane
is just a
situation.
thought. So you check stuff.
You know?
And give it to her and let her process it. So she's
Oh.
doing it in.
Oh, good
Or
for you.
out. And I'm trying to figure that out so I don't get so frustrated, you know,
Yeah.
with all the stuff. But then beauty is like, she comes to visit my brother, my husband is like, thank you for not being like that. I'm like a hero.
He appreciates your.
He's like, thank you.
Wow, I like your name.
I did that last
Cool.
night.
Somebody's gonna start hiring you.
Somebody with ADHD was supposed to be working on her paper and did something else. I just started by them a week ago.
Oh, really?
It is amazing. It's only
Yes.
1 week and it's like, I'm not rubbing my eyes, I don't have a headache. I can read more than 2 words or a sentence at a time, I'm remembering things. It's just phenomenal. I can't believe it.
I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Every time I do the ADHD class, I end up with one person out of the class that goes and gets medication.
Yeah.
And they'll come back and they'll say,
Yeah.
wow, it's
Yeah.
so much easier to do my papers now and I can
Yes.
concentrate.
Well, and I have this thing against, anything that wasn't natural, but I've been seeing Jan Weber for a year and finally she said, "You thought about this?" And she gave me a book and then I discussed it with my physicians and he would write on it, Dr. McCutcheon, he said, and he had he used 4 cornerstones, a checklist. I says, yeah. He said, and I said, well, I'm nervous, but what if it makes my heart go really fast, as a stimulant? It doesn't. Because I get hyper and I can work myself up anyway.
It works the opposite.
It does, I'm so relaxed. Oh, it's just, I can't believe in 1 week.
Yeah, oh yeah, it works immediately. That's, I've had adults who've said, this has changed my life.
Yeah.
And you think, isn't it sad that they had to.
I know, why didn't I notice?
And then I have people cry in their office.
I know, I
because
stop
They
myself.
think
and
back
cry.
and say, if I could have had this 20 years ago.
I know,
my
because
life
I
would have been
catch
so
myself in
different."
that bottom corner of the hopelessness and,
Yeah.
how can this ever come together? It's like, wow.
Turn this off.
We're recording.
Is it going? Does it say record?
Yeah, I know, I
Okay.
go through to kind of know what's
Right.
she's.
One of the things I want to point out to you, how many of you know about right brain, left brain?
I always forget which one does what though.
Okay, well, you'll figure it out real fast.
I know.
There are right brain people, there are left brain people, there are whole brain people. Those are the lucky people that have both. And start out that way. But if you think about most teachers, they tend to be left brain. Very organized, very structured, very concrete. You know, step 1, step 2, step 3, everything has a way to be done. And you do it this way and no exceptions to the rule. Right brain people think outside the lines. They're creative, they're imaginative, they're often artistic or dramatic. They can think of different ways of doing things. So the teacher may say, let's say in an art project, they may give them specific instruction about what they want them to do, and the right brain person gets creative with it and goes and does something, you know, more or different, and a left brain teacher gets mad because he didn't follow the rules. And so there's nothing wrong with right brain people. They're the inventors, they're the people that come up with new ideas, you know, they're very persistent, stick with it. If they come up with a new idea, they'll stay with it, they won't give up. Left brain people are rule followers. There's a set way to do things and you follow the rules. Think of the industrial age. When they, you know, in our industrial age, if you went to work in the factory or you went on a farm, you had to do step 1, step 2, step 3, you had to do it one way. And so actually people quit school after the 5th grade. The right brain people went off to apprenticeships. Now we make them stay in school till they're 18, now maybe even, or 16, now maybe even 18. Now, here's the thing. If we look at right brain, left brain, your ADHD people are the top 5% of the right brain side. Most teachers are left brain. And what teachers are you going to have the most trouble with?
Old teachers.
What?
Old teachers.
Well, that's true too.
Because they're.
But the severely left brain teachers are going to be the worst.
Severely.
Because they're rigid and controlling. You've got to do it this way and no exceptions to the rule, period. When this kid gets this teacher, they're going to have a really bad time. And I always say to teachers, there's nothing wrong with this teacher, and they do well with all these kids on the left side and the whole brain side. But anybody on the right brain end, it's going to be harder for them. And I think, this is my theory. Nobody's proved it, I wish they would. I think all right brain learners are underachievers. Because teachers have not learned how to teach in a way that includes right brain learners enough. There are some that are really good at doing that. I had a friend who was a teacher and all the kids wanted her. But she was a whole brain person herself, and she knew how to integrate right and left. The kids loved her, the parents loved her, you know, and the principals went nuts because everybody was requesting her for the teacher. So now what we want to do is we want to understand the kinds of strategies that you have to come up with to help these people. So I want you to turn to page 93. Because what I want you to see from the model of Brown's model, now we look at, okay, what is it that we have to help them learn that will help them to compensate? Huge, number 1. They don't know how to organize and manage their time. But if you sit there and try to tell them how to do that, what's going to happen? Nothing. Because it's auditory. So we have to come up with visual or hands-on ways to help them to organize. And They have to be trained in, because just going over it once with them isn't gonna do it. It's gotta get into the long-term memory. So this is where, how many of you are in the coaching program? Nobody here? Okay.
Well, I'm not now, but I have.
Okay,
Mhm.
but coaching is a way, and coaching of an ADHD person is different than regular coaching. You have to have ADHD training and coaching to work with these people if you're gonna be a coach. But I'll tell you, it's very lucrative. We have 3 different students who graduated from Adler who went into coaching ADHD kids, and they have waiting lists. Of course, they're in areas where the people can afford to pay for it too. But the point is that there has to be enough repetition to get it into long-term memory. Okay? So creating habits. So if you have kids, think of anything that needs to be organized, they're going to have a problem with it. Same with adults. You literally have to have a training mechanism with them, a visual training mechanism. If you're right brain, you'd be really good at coming up with creative strategies for doing this. The sooner we get these people on lists, calendars, charts, anything that's visual, the better, because that helps them to remember. And visual organizational systems. So when organizing a desk or a kid's bedroom or a household, instead of putting things in drawers and boxes, in things that are enclosed, we look to visual organizational systems. Kids with ADHD will throw all the stuff out of the drawer to find the shirt they want to wear. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I have these people putting the kids' clothes in 3 baskets. Underwear basket, shirt basket, pants basket. And they're fine. Put it in a drawer, and their room is just a disaster area. These kids can't function out of a toy box. You got to take every toy out to find the one you want. There has to be a visual organizational system for the toys. Same with an office desk. You find me an ADHD person and you will have a desk that looks like something blew up. But they'll say, well, I can find stuff though. Let's see, it's over here, and they'll reach under something and grab something out. But they have to see it in order to know it's there. So, nowadays, what is so cool is we've got many more tools for visual organization systems than I ever had before. I mean, you can have a great fun time in a Container Store, or Office Max, or Office Depot, and creating systems that really work well. And the motto is, and I use it on my grandchildren now because my son's ADHD, so I'm starting early, right? Everything has to have a home. So when you're done with something, where's its home? Because you always go home when you're done, and so do your toys. And then when you come the next time, you know where to find them. And my 2-year-old grandchild now goes and climbs up at the desk and opens the drawer and gets the colors out, opens the other place and gets the color book out, and when she's done, she puts it back. But it's training what works. So we have to train them in organizational systems. Even adults. I think some of you have heard me, maybe if you've been with me in supervision, if I have an adult with ADHD who comes into my office, the first thing I'm going to do is train them on how to remember to come back. Because they are notorious for missing appointments, because they forget. And you have to figure out with them a system that will work. But now we have these we have these PDAs, we have them on cell phones, we have them on computers, and if we can get them into the habit, that's the hardest part, the habit. Now, I got my son a cell phone, because they don't lose the cell phone. So I got the cell phone because it had the PDA on it. But then every time he had an appointment, I'd say, get out your cell phone, put it in, and set the alarm. And he didn't think it was important until after the alarm had gone off 2 or 3 times, and he realized he would have forgotten that appointment. And now he puts everything on that PDA. ADHD people learn from experience, which is oftentimes mistakes. Once they've experienced that something works, they're more motivated to keep doing it, and then they get into the habit of doing it, and then things go better for them. So organization is huge. And it involves memory as well. How are these people going to remember anything? With kids in school, notorious. Didn't remember to write down my homework assignment. Can't find my planner. Don't remember what the homework assignment is, so I didn't think I had an assignment. These are all things that you have to work a system with them that helps them to do this so that they can be successful. I get kids in middle school, junior high, and high school whose grades go up 1 to 2 full grades after I have one session that teaches them an organizational system, which I teach in my weekend class. Easy. Nobody ever thinks of these things. You know, it drives me nuts. I wish schools would just let, you know, have everybody in the whole class, teach them all the system that works for everybody, you know? And I'm starting to see it. Some kids are coming in now and they're teachers who have been through training with me. But the problem is one school will get trained and do it, and then they move from junior high to high school, and the whole system is gone. Teachers want them to do it a different way, and then they go down the tubes again. Okay, so organization is huge, solves a lot of problems when you can help them with just the general ideas. By the way, they're also attracted to color. Often they're very artistic. So color coding can be very, very helpful. Like things are the same color. Or if you have a container, or if you have papers. Now so I have some teachers who will put all their handouts on a different colored paper. So the kids know, oh, this is my history because it's on green paper and everything else is white, kind of thing. So using color can be really helpful. Okay, another big area is anything that has more than one step to it is a problem for people with ADHD. First of all, they can't remember more than one step. Second of all, they can't plan, organize, or manage anything that has several steps. So so if they have a goal, they don't get to the goal. Or if they have a project that's supposed to be completed, they don't get it done, and then the last night they're working all night and meltdowns and the works. Because they tend to think if you have a project to do, there's only one step, and that is do it. They don't have any concept of how long it will take to do it. So they have to have a visual road map from beginning to end how to get through it. And you know, it's interesting, teachers in grade school will plan out that map for them, and they'll do a piece at a time, but the teacher never teaches them what she has been doing, or he has been doing. They think by osmosis, these kids will pick this up. Well, guess what? The left-brained kids do. They just know how to organize it. They got the gene. The right-brained kids get to middle school and junior high, and the teacher thinks, now you're going to organize this stuff yourself. These kids are just totally lost, don't have a clue. And a lot of times they have a parent who doesn't have a clue either because they don't know how to organize anything either. So now we've got a double whammy here. You know, and then the parents come to conferences and the teacher tells them something and they don't remember what the teacher said when they left because they have ADHD and it was all done auditorily. You know, and so it gets really complex. And if you can imagine, if they have more than one disorder, if they have comorbid conditions that you're dealing with, or if the condition is severe versus mild or moderate. A lot of the students here are doing in-home family. Those are the most severe cases. They've got a more severe diagnosis, or they've got several comorbid conditions, and it's amazing how often they haven't been diagnosed. Nobody spotted the condition. And so these people are just floundering. So organization, anything to do with memory, you've got to have strategies for. Anything to do with projects or goals that have steps. You'll hear people say, oh, you know, I always wanted to end up in some kind of profession. And they never got there. You know, kids with ADHD flunk out of college because they can't organize. You know, they go to class and then they go back to the dorm and somebody's watching soap operas or playing video games, and they get distracted, and before they know it, the day's over. They haven't done anything. I have to help kids structure their time for school before they go to college, or they flunk out. So things that they have trouble getting done have to be moved into a routine with visual reminders, charts, sticky notes, different things to help them remember the things that they need to do. They don't know how to problem solve. 6 steps of problem solving is great to use with people with ADHD or with their whole family, because there's a visual, they can follow it, and they discover, wow, I can actually solve problems. What ADHD kids and adults do is when they have a problem, they quit. They just stop. They're stuck, don't know what to do, so they do nothing. So those are huge. Then, adults oftentimes have major money management problems. They forget to write down what they wrote the check for. And you all know, what would be a simple solution for people who can't remember what they wrote the check for?
Get the checkbook with the stubs.
Yeah, that have
Not the stubs, the copy underneath.
Yeah.
But you know, a lot of times these people are not problem solvers. It's never occurred to them to get the ones that have the carbon underneath. So a lot of times it's just pointing out to them, if they got the one with the carbon, they would be able to keep track of their checks. And then they say, wow, that's a great idea. It's like, duh. You know, but they don't think of these things, see? And it's visual, they can see it. So a lot of times I get people on Quicken, because Quicken helps them, and a lot of them have math problems, so they, you know, if they have math problems, they'll switch their letter numbers. So if the check was for 125, they put 152. It's worse when they do it the other way. It was 152 and they put down 125 and then they overdraft the account, kind of thing. I mean, that won't help in terms of if they put it into the Quicken the wrong way. But it does add and subtract for them, and it does help them with taxes. These people are always late on taxes or never did them because it's overwhelming. So you can just see how many areas of their life get impacted in adulthood if they don't have these strategies or skills. They need help with how to manage the fact that they can't stay on task or they can't manage their emotions. We need strategies or medications. And you will see on the page 91, they did an MTA study, which was a multimodal treatment study on what was most effective in helping children. And what they discovered is there's nothing more effective than medication for children, because absolutely it will help them to stay on task and therefore be able to take in, absorb, helps with that processing.
The problem is when the parents also have ADHD and nobody's giving them their medication.
So then you have to have a strategy for how they're going to remember to take the medication.
Right.
And we tried to hook the strategy to a habit they already have. And so, you're absolutely right, Nancy. You know, it's one thing to give people a suggestion, but then you have to ask, do they have an executive function problem that's gonna keep them from implementing the strategy? So we gotta take it another additional step to help them with the implementation of the strategy. How are you gonna remember to do the strategy until it gets into habit? So that's where we come with reminders, or we attach it to another habit, various ways of helping them, you know, get into it. And some people are against medications. Parents are against medications. You can start with strategies. You can help teachers with strategies. But what I find is when parents discover that the teacher has really tried strategies, but the strategies weren't enough, if they have gotten strategies, but the strategies weren't enough, then they're more often willing to try the medication. And what I've heard many times, and I don't know if there's any research on this yet, but when children are given medication early, they learn good study skills. They learn how to focus, they learn how to concentrate. And some of them have been able to go off the medication in high school, and they are able to keep doing what worked. But if they've never done it, then they need the medication.
Yeah, I asked a junior high boy that once. I said, so does this help you? He said, yeah. He said, I can tell a difference. If I forget, I know I've forgotten. He said, and I need it. And
Yeah.
so
And if you wait till junior high or high school, then these kids don't want to take the medication because they don't want to be different from the other kids. So the
he said,
idea is the earlier these kids get diagnosed and get the strategies, the better. And so medication is almost a necessity in the schools that we have today. I think if we ever got to the point where we changed schools so that they taught to a child's learning style, a lot of the kids on medication wouldn't be on medication. But the question is, what's more important, to keep them off medication and have them fail, or have them on medication so they can be successful? And that's what it comes down to in our schools today. And charter schools are helping, because charter schools are doing more of the visual hands-on stuff. And the schools that specialize, like the schools of the arts, you know, they will cater more to that style of learning. Homeschooling works great with ADHD, but the parents of these kids can't say, oh my God, you know, it's hard enough having them as much as I do now. I couldn't have them at home all the time, I'd go nuts, you know, kind of thing. But if it's a left brain parent, and they homeschool their right brain ADHD kids, oftentimes those are the most successful. Those are the kids that get scholarships into big name schools. It's very interesting, because they go by project. What are you interested in? Then they go learn about it, and they learn to read and do math and all the things that go with learning about something they're fascinated about. Yes, Kristen?
Question about when to consider medication. I have mild ADD. My daughter definitely has ADD, to the point where, I mean, she can't organize anything. Everything's a mess. But she does great in school. I mean, she's fine. So would you?
How old is she?
She's going into 3rd grade. She's 8. Well, she'll be 8 next month.
Yeah, see, when these kids are in elementary school, they have the same teacher all day. So if they have a good teacher, the teacher eventually figures them out and figures out what works and does what works. But the minute they hit middle school, they have a teacher for an hour, and the teacher never knows who they are, what their learning styles are, anything about them. They're just teaching a subject. Looking back, my son was not on medication, but with working with teachers and so forth, he did okay through grade school, except for one very left-brained teacher. But once into middle school, that's when they run into trouble, because they just cannot manage all this stuff without strategies.
But what I'm wondering is, I mean, for sure, if they're having trouble, you'd want them on medication. But would you consider medication just for other stuff, like the conflict at home with the organization and the forgetting and the,
Sure.
like, she's so
You'll find the
sluggish.
medication
I'm
will
like,
smooth
will
it-
you please move?
The medication will smooth out their moods.
Yeah.
Also, there are strategies for doing homework. They can't stay focused. And so one of the strategies I use is what I call rotating through your homework. And that's
Do a little bit here.
deciding how long could they do one thing before they really get distracted and bored and can't do it anymore. And you use a timer. And you have them set it for 10 minutes, and they do math for 10 minutes, and they rotate to English for 10 minutes, and then they do history for 10 minutes, and they go back to math for another 10 minutes. And then as they get into and they've got that down, then you see, well, let's see if you could manage it for 15. And you try to work up gradually to focusing for longer periods of time. Now, sometimes that's very helpful. Sometimes, as I said, if the strategy isn't enough, it's necessary to have medication. And where attention is concerned, because it's the governor in the brain, we haven't found, research has not found anything that works as well as the medication. Now, you will hear about omega-3. There is one research now that says omega-3 helps, which is fish oil. You will hear people say diet. Well, guess what? It won't help with attention, but if you have a hyperactive child, hey, cutting out sugar and starch is a good thing because it just gives them more energy. So it can help, but it does not cure the problem. So there are many things out there that you'll hear about, but unless they have substantiated with research, there can be a placebo effect. You have parents saying, oh yeah, you know, people that believe in everything natural, they'll say, oh, my child is much better, but then you go interview the teacher. No. But the parent becomes more relaxed and less stressed because they think this is going to work, and then the child becomes less stressed and the behavior gets better. You know, so people do have to check out research, and one research isn't enough because people can sway research. So you have to have 2 or 3 or 4 research, and you'll learn that in research if you haven't taken it yet, to prove that something actually does work. And part of our challenge is getting parents to the place where they'll actually agree to try medication. I mean, Barkley, who is the international #1 expert on ADHD, he will tell parents it's negligence not to put your child on medication because you're setting your kid up for failure for the rest of their life if you don't put them on medication. He's no holds barred, you know, but he's seen the worst cases too, you know. But I don't recommend that you go, you know, he can get away with it because he's an international expert, you're not. So we have to be a lot more gentle in our approaches, and we may, you know, if they say, I don't want to use medication, I say, fine, let's work with strategies. But then when they see, in spite of the strategies, there's still problems, say, it's probably not going to get any better unless you get the medication. And this is what you have to look forward to in terms of problems if you can't get this worked out. So, you know, I tell them what the risk factors are if the child is not on medication. The kids are not on medication are the ones that do start to experiment with drugs. And they, you know, they're at risk for abuse of drugs. Was there something?
Oh, I was just saying, I used to be like, oh, natural, just was like, well, shouldn't do my, you know, just kind of in general, until I developed hypothyroid. And I take some thyroid every day. And then developed some heart issues and high cholesterol and things that were hereditary, were biological, no matter what I tried, lifestyle and things. And I've still tried other things.
Where you
know,
can.
Yeah, where I can. But I realized that there are biological things going on in the body and in the brain that medication is designed to help and can help. And so that's really shifted my own perspective. In fact, with my heart condition, the doctor said, I'd even up your thyroid medication to a higher dosage than normal to kind of compensate for your slower moving system. And I identified a lot of the ADD symptoms, and I've discovered, the cardiologist explained to me, my body actually functions in a slow way. You know, is that interesting?
And ADHD inattentive type people tend to be slower starting. It's kind of, what is it,
It's my whole lifestyle.
hypoactive instead of hyperactive. Sluggish
Yeah.
is very common in inattentive type. But it's true, it's a body chemistry kind of thing. And, you know, good, healthy eating is good for everybody. But if you've got a condition, sometimes, it's like diabetes. You know, sometimes you can manage it by watching what you eat, but sometimes you have to have the additional help of insulin. And it's the same way with ADHD, and this is something I find that you have to get across to people with ADHD. Some people can manage without medication, some people can't. And kids with ADHD, they'll take the medication for a while, and they'll think they're cured. Oh, I'm fine now, I can go off. They go off and they go right back. You know, the parents will say, oh my God, you know, the grades are going down again, kind of thing. And it's the same with some other psychological, neurological types of problems, like bipolar people will go off their meds, or schizophrenics will go off their meds, because they think they're cured, because they're acting normally. And then bingo, here we go, you know. Okay, so, the point here is we have to develop a lot of strategies. We have to do education, because we have to educate these people on what is ADHD, what are they able to do, what are they not able to do, what kind of accommodations meaning how can you change the environment that better fits the situation, what strategies would be helpful, what kind of skills do you have to teach so that they can do these things. All that education, and get parents to understand and accept that this is the type of child they have. They're not bad kids, they're just different. And the hardest time is for left brain parents to deal with ADHD kids, because they just cannot conceive of the fact that this is not a behavior problem. Why doesn't this kid be orderly like I am? They just can't understand it, and they really have a hard time. Education is really vitally important to everybody involved with people with ADHD. And then, after education, training in strategies, accommodations, skills that are going to be necessary for them to function. So if you're working with ADHD, if you think about psychotherapy and you think about social work and things, actually when you work with ADHD people, it's kind of like it's a combination of therapy, case management, social work, all mixed together. And to get them going. And there's nobody else doing this. In fact, Dan Haugen has said, you know, we need to have a master's degree. It's something that fits in between social work and therapy that pulls all this stuff together for people like this. So all these things have to come together. And if we think now as psychotherapists, what kind of mistaken core beliefs are people going to have when they come up through life being told, you can do it if you want to, you just don't want to. You're misbehaving, you're underachieving, you know, all these messages. So at least by the time these kids get into middle school and all the way on from that point on, these people have mistaken ideas about themselves. And they are very critical of themselves. So their self-worth is usually in the tank, because they criticize themselves every bit as much as other people criticize them for the things that they aren't doing correctly. And so we also have to bring in lifestyle And you will often see in early recollections how people dealt with their ADHD and what kind of beliefs they would have achieved out of that. One belief that's very common is, I'm stupid. Because, and I'll give you an example. My son, when he went on medication, came home from school and said, Mom, I'm smart. And I said, well, I know, your teachers have been telling you that all your life, and so have we. He said, well, if I was so smart, why couldn't I do what everybody else in my class could do? I felt stupid because they could do it and I couldn't. Today, I could do it. And he said, you know what? The teacher taught us something new. He said, I was able to pay attention the whole time. I was able to ask questions, and you know what? Somebody asked me to help him afterwards, and I was able to help him. Another ADHD kid, not on medication. You know, he was just thrilled. And all this time, he was being told, you're just immature, lazy, just need to buckle down, need to try harder. He was not hyperactive or impulsive. He was in sports all the time, burned off all that energy. You know, but in spite of all the good and varying things I'd ever done with this kid, it was all getting wiped out at school because of the things that were going on. And that's what we have to realize, you know? You can be the best parent in the world, but put a kid with a disability in the wrong situation, and it can be very destructive. Very. Even in preschool. Even in therapeutic, they're gonna have therapeutic preschool. I can't tell you how many times I'll have students come in and tell me about this kid that's just totally out of control. You know, and sometimes it's, you have to find out what the behavior, you know, how the parent's been dealing with them. If they're permissive parents, that explains it. But when they're not permissive parents, and these kids are still out of control, and everybody just assumes it's a behavior problem, or nobody tries to diagnose. I had a student in my class the other night, my supervision class. I said, that kid needs a neuropsych eval. There's some real problems here, and I think this kid is probably Asperger's, ADHD, depressed, and anxious. 4 diagnoses, none of which have been diagnosed. So, you know, diagnosis is very, very important. If you don't know what's going on, refer them to get testing. Okay? All right. Then a lot of these people have social skills problems. No surprise, right? So a lot of these children don't get invited to birthday parties, don't have friends because they're too hyper, or they blurt stuff out, different things. And then what happens? People tell them what they should do, tell them what they shouldn't do. Role playing is a very helpful way to teach social skills to people with ADHD. Well, you reverse roles and you put them on the receiving end of what they're doing. So they get to experience how it feels when somebody does that to them. And then to give them strategies for how to handle situations. I've had kids who their strategy was, I never speak up in class at all. Because if I speak up in class, I blurt something out and the teacher gets mad. So I just keep my mouth shut. And if I don't understand something, that's too bad, I just don't talk. So there are many, many, many strategies, and if any of you here have ADHD, I'm sure you have come up with some of them. It's great when ADHD people get together because they share these great ideas with each other. I had a nonprofit called Attention Deficit Support Services for 9 years, and I turned it over to LDA of Minnesota. They now have it. And they have like 40 workshops a year, which is what I did, and they have an adult support group, parent support group, and a referral helpline kind of thing. I should have brought some of my handouts. I'll try to remember that before we're done, because they put out a brochure thing with all the courses, classes and stuff.
What are they called again?
It's LDA of Minnesota. And they are online too. If you Google LDA Minnesota, you'll find it. Okay? So what you're gonna be doing this morning is I'm gonna give you two choices. And you're gonna work with an ADHD person, and you can decide whether you wanna be an ADHD teenager if you're the client, or an ADHD adult. Now, the key here is to fully understand what are the executive function problems that are underlying what's going on, and then what are the strategies that you might come up with that would help them compensate for that problem. Okay, so I'm going to give you two cases. I see these people all the time. Teenager. Parent brings the teenager in. Johnny or Sarah is a smart kid, but is getting all D's or D's and F's in school. The parents make them do homework every night from what is written on their planner, or if they say they have homework. But when conference time comes, teachers are telling them there's a whole bunch of stuff that never got turned in. Some of the stuff the parents know the kid did, and some they didn't even know were assigned. And so this kid is totally discouraged, doesn't know how to fix the problem, hates school, would rather be any place but there. So that's a teenager. Has 7 classes, can't keep track of anything. Book bag's a mess, for, you know. So that's the teenager. The adult. The adult says, I need to organize my life. My house or my apartment is a mess. I don't know where to begin to deal with that. My desk at work is a mess. I don't know how to deal with that. I get projects that are supposed to be done at work, and I don't get them done. My phone rings, and I answer the phone. I can't remember what I was doing when the phone rang, and then I go do something else. So I can't seem to stay on task and get these projects done. My boss put me on probation. My husband or my wife is ticked at me because things are a mess at home. And we may have to go through bankruptcy because of our finances. Okay? So, you can take either one of those. I mean, as the client, you can decide who you want to be. And where did I put my journals here? I forgot to pull those out. There we go. So, we're going to divide up. And hopefully you guys remember. How many was it? 2 or 3 or 6? Even numbers. Okay, so who was a client last time, if you remember? That's 4, and there are 10 of us, right?
I was an observer last time.
You were what?
I was an observer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
oddball.
Yep, okay, good. Okay, so the rest of you are clients. Let's see, 2. Go. Okay, so let's see. John, Clients, please raise your hands. John, pick somebody you haven't worked with before.
Haven't worked with Hadia.
Okay, great. And Shromi?
Oh goodness. I've worked with everyone.
Everybody, okay, well then just pick somebody.
Okay. Gosh, this is horrible. Hey Cassie, how are you?
Okay, good. Yes. All right, and then, were you a therapist?
I'm a therapist, yep.
Okay, who would you like to pick?
I'll pick Kristen.
Okay, and,
I think I worked with everybody too, but, can we work together?
I don't know that we
That's fine.
have.
Okay.
I just visited.
now who's the last therapist? Somebody, there were 5 of you.
Uh-oh.
When we held up our hands, it looked like there were more clients.
Okay, therapist, raise your hand.
Yeah, therapist, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Did
Oh,
someone
we
not
need
get their
another
hand?
therapist? We got 2 people left? Who's left?
Claire.
Claire and
I'm a
Nancy
client.
were left.
And Nancy.
a client.
Nancy, you're a client? What are you?
Client.
Okay, so one of you gets to be a therapist. Again. I'll
You
let
get to
you.
be a therapist.
Yeah. You got out of that one, huh? Okay.
Vote on this.
All right, so we're gonna take a good, I'm thinking between 45 minutes, about 45 minutes, and I'll come around, and if you're still in deep and haven't gotten through, then we'll extend it a little bit, okay?
So
And
Nancy,
if
are
you have questions, if you get stuck, you can call a timeout, or you can ask me, the expert, you know, yell out, and I'll come and help you, okay? So, if you're going someplace strange, let me know where you are so I can come around and find you. And I don't know how many people are out there, so.
Starbucks sounds great.
Shall maybe find your spot. Find a place.
It is, it's correct. Where do you want to go?
It doesn't matter to me.
Oh, boy, it would be nice to be outside.
Do you want to go outside?
Sure, I'm fine with that.
It's like great.
We better tell her we're going someplace
Yeah.
green.
That would be so much fun, it's beautiful.
But I always am.
I do too.
So you should do
Somebody,
I feel like I'm at a
if you
movie
wanted to go
theater.
someplace
Yes.
private beside the
Wouldn't that be
library, you
great?
could always Margie's office.
Well, where would you like to go, Hadia?
Hey, you.
Oh,
I need to stop at
outside?
the restroom.
All right, lovely.
Okay.
We're gonna, you know, the club here is always nice.
Kind of went outside.
I'm drinking hot water to warm up and it's.
So, and then you have to go to the bathroom, yeah.
Everybody's going outside.
you? Yeah, and you don't, the dishes can sit there, but when they're yours, they can't sit there. I mean, well, you start getting it. Special time. It is. It is. Oh, I love it. Don't you love it? Don't you love it?
I want to come with you.
Yeah. I was down at my brother's and his grandson was 4 and my brother was to be babysitting while he had stuff to get done, so I just played with this kid all day. We played all day. We did water, we did squirt guns around the house. Then I'm doing this little piggy, you know, under the bath, and he kept going again, and so I kept doing it again, and then he looks at me and says,
Yeah.
"Kids will just leave it alone tonight, nobody let her know."
It's more fun at your house.
Well,
It is, yeah, that's true.
and it should be.
Yeah, exactly. So it is fun.
Well, it's good to see you go. It's good to see you go.
I walk 2-3 times a day around the right time, but
you want, with the typical day, you're gonna want to identify each time a problem comes up as you go through the typical day with each person in the family, how they deal with it, and if you see signs of some other kind of diagnosis, then of course you have to make a note of that or go back eventually and check out those symptoms. So for example, a child who's depressed may have trouble getting up in the morning, but they might have mentioned something about that to you earlier. So somebody who's severely depressed doesn't have the energy or the desire to get out of bed if they're severely depressed. But we're looking for, you know, a pattern of behavior that would suggest a mistaken goal and a pattern of behavior that leads to that mistaken goal. So you go through the morning routine, you ask about each child in each step. There's getting up, there's getting dressed, there's getting cleaned up for school, there's getting breakfast, there's getting out the door on time. And families with a misbehaving child, you're going to have a pretty good idea of some of the mistaken behavior and some hunches about goals. So once you get them off to school, then you go to, when school is out, who arrives home first? What are they supposed to do? Do they do it? When mom or dad runs into a problem, how do they address it? So, you know, Johnny comes home first. What they're supposed to do is have their snack and sit down and do their homework. And mom says, but Johnny, he gets a snack, but then he zips over and flips on the TV. And I will go over and say, now Johnny, you got to do your homework, remember, before you watch TV. And how does that work? Well, he ignores me, just keeps watching TV. So what do? Well, after a few, 5 minutes or so, I go back and say, Johnny, come on, time to get to your homework. How does that work? Well, Johnny doesn't do anything. He keeps watching TV. And what do? Well, another 5 minutes. Then I go and yell at him. And then what happens? Well, finally, I turn off the TV and drag Johnny over to the table, and now he's ready to do his homework, right? And so we go through the homework routine, because that's another typical time for families to run into difficulties. After homework, what do? And then, of course, we come to the dinner time. Very common time for people to have problems with kids fighting at the dinner table. Between homework and dinner time, too, they will talk about kids who fight with each other, don't get along, get mom involved, and come and tattle to mom while she's fixing dinner, etc., etc. And then when dinner happens, then there is the kids who won't eat, the kids who dawdle over their food, and then they have to be prodded again and again. Come on, finish up your dinner. Come on, come on. Kids who have to be prodded a lot, and then they'll start to eat a little, and then they have to be prodded a lot, and then they'll eat a little bit. That's more attention. And the kid who refuses says, no way, no how, I'm not eating this crap. That's power. And so we'll begin to get a sense of, is this child into tension, into power, into revenge, what's going on? So then after supper, what happens? Maybe the kids watch TV, play, whatever. Then of course bedtime is another common time for difficulties. And so you go through the whole bedtime routine. Well, how does the bedtime go? Who has to go to bed who has to get ready for bed first? How does it go? Do they cooperate? Do they get nagged a lot? And then with little kids, it'll be, well, we put them to bed. Well, is that the end of it then? Well, no. Then, Mommy, I need a drink of water. Mommy, I'm scared, or whatever. So it continues on even after the lights go out. But by the time you get through that day, you've got a really good picture of this family. A picture of behavior of the child and the goals, and a picture of how these parents are parenting. Are they doing the right things and they're not working, or are they doing things that don't work? If they're doing the right things and they're not working, if they have, let's say, choices and consequences, and it's not working, I would look to a neurological problem. Because when there's no payoff for misbehavior, and when there are consequences for misbehavior, normal children will stop the behavior. But if they don't stop it, there's another reason why they're not stopping. So if we look back to the ADHD child, if the parent says, if you don't remember to bring your history book home tomorrow, you're grounded. And they don't bring it home, so they're grounded. So they say the next day, if you don't bring your history book home, you're grounded. Next day, they get grounded again. They get grounded and grounded and grounded. They can't remember to bring home their history book. Well, this is a memory problem. How are they going to remember? They don't remember. And they want to remember, but they can't remember. So we have to differentiate between, is there a neurological reason, or is this a behavioral problem? If there's a behavioral problem, you will see a pattern all through everything, all through the typical day kind of stuff. You'll see a pattern that repeats itself. But you do have to ask, is there an executive function that's necessary here for this person to be successful? Okay? So there is some diagnostic work that has to go on here in your head in terms, is there any other reason why this child might be behaving this way? Okay? So as you go through this and you say to the parent, and what did you do? And when after the 6th time they tell you what they did, and it's the same thing they've been doing before, and you say, how did that work? And they laugh and they say it didn't work again. Still's not working. You know, they begin to see the humor in the fact that they keep doing what doesn't work. And when they can see that, they're going to be much more receptive to trying something different. And you can even say with a smile on your face, well, did it work any better this time? Well, no, didn't. Okay, so what did you do the next time? Well, did the same thing again. You know, well, did it work any better? No, you know. So this is a very effective way for you as the therapist to assess, but it's also very insightful to the entire family about the dynamics of what's going on in the family. Having gone through that typical day, if you then bring in your 4 goals of misbehavior and you tell the parent how the parent would feel, you say, well, each time this happens, and you could ask that as you go through the typical day, well, how do you feel when he does this? Well, I'm irritated. Sign of attention. The parent says, I'm not going to let this kid get away with this. You know, and they're mad. Power. I feel hurt. You know, he told me I was a bad mom. That's revenge. So once we've gone through the typical day, we want to help the family to identify what is the purpose in this behavior. Now, I've even seen teachers use this with students, with the entire class, saying, you know, every child wants to connect, count, you know, those C's. And when they don't feel like they are, that's when they misbehave. So what we want to do is help this child feel better, feel like they're connecting to us, feel like they're counting, and so forth. And you can identify with the entire family what is the purpose for this behavior. Well, this is to get attention because this child wants to connect, but isn't finding a more successful way to do that. This child is doing this for power because this child wants to count and be self-reliant and hasn't found a productive way to do that. And so then we're ready to help them figure out, how can I help this child to achieve this positive goal, and what do we need to do to eliminate the negative behavior. Now, for young children up to the age of 12, we would assign strategies for the parents because the parents are still training the children. So we want to train in the parents on how to deal with their children. And in some cases, even into adolescence. So with power struggles, teaching parents to withdraw from power struggles, for example, with teenagers is a very effective tool, and giving choices, those kinds of things. But when kids reach adolescence, we do have to introduce to the family the idea of the family meeting. And in your 3-ring binder, you have the instructions for a family meeting. And a family meeting can be very, very helpful because problems can be brought up. And I always emphasize, the child isn't the problem, the issue is the problem. Dirty clothes being left on the floor is the problem. Johnny not picking up his dirty clothes is not the problem. It's the dirty clothes being on the problem. Whether I lived in this household or I lived anyplace else, I'd still be upset if there were dirty clothes on the floor. That's the problem. And we want to begin introducing the idea that the family starts solving problems together. This is the democratic way, and adolescents want to be included. They don't want to be dictated to. So it is important for families to begin, if not before. It's always a great idea to start family meetings when children are young and get into the routine of it. But if not before, definitely if you're getting families with teenagers, you need to introduce this concept. And I have a family where the kids are late teenage and early 20s, and they're all at home. And I introduced the idea of a family meeting to this family. The mom's burned out trying to deal with everything herself. And so in this case, even at that late time, we started with the family.
78.
Pardon me?
78. 78.
Thank you. I'm searching myself. Yeah. Okay. Now, here's the thing though. When you have a family meeting, the typical parents try to run the meeting. And the kids think, oh great, this is just one more opportunity to get nagged by mom and dad. So it's very important that you go over the family meeting with the family. And if you notice, there is a chairperson. And the chairperson runs the meeting. They don't make any decisions, they just run the meeting. And then there's a secretary. And that's a person who writes down what's decided. So what's the action that's going to be taken? What did everybody agree to? We post it on the refrigerator door because somebody will not remember it the way it was decided. Kids will manipulate things and say, oh no, I don't think that's the way we decided to do it. So everybody sits down for the meeting and the duties are rotated. And I always tell parents, you're last to be chairperson. So that each child gets a chance to be the chairman. And so it feels very democratic. It's not mom and dad running things. Now, we usually recommend that starting out, these meetings should be no more than like 15 minutes. And start out with just a few things. For sure, I have all the families bring out a family calendar and start identifying what's happening during the week. So that you begin to teach, this is an organization plan, and it begins to identify who's doing what and when, so everybody knows what's going on. And I had, for example, a family where the mother was so ticked because she had her whole evening planned on Friday, and at 3:30 in the afternoon her daughter announces that she wants her to take her someplace. You know, because her friends just decided that they wanted to do this. And mom, instead of saying, no, I have other plans, she feels like she has to drop everything and accommodate her daughter. So what was suggested was, when they have the family meeting, that the parents have the right to say, if you have an event on the calendar where you need mom or dad, if it's not on the calendar by the middle of the week, by Wednesday, mom and dad aren't going to be available because they're going to make other plans. Is this not life? You know, the world doesn't stop because you decide to make plans. And this mom, this kid was doing this to her every week. Well, the next week, sure enough, she came to her on Friday. She said, I'm really sorry, it's not on the calendar. Well, guess what? From that point on, every week, she managed to get a hold of her friends on Wednesday and find out what they were going to do on Friday, because if she didn't, she wasn't going to get there. And so this is again a training thing, but they learn from the consequences what works, what doesn't work. So having a calendar, when you think of ADHD, color coding is great. Have each member of the family is a different color. So when there's something that that person is going to be having to do, you write it in their color. So they learn, if they get overwhelmed by all that stuff on a calendar, they just have to look for their color and see what's affecting them that week. You know, Johnny's dentist appointment is in blue. And, you know, Mary's dance class is in yellow or green or something like that. So the calendar is always a good one. Chores. Dividing up chores because we want to teach responsibility. And so oftentimes I encourage parents to make a list of all the chores that need to be done in the family. And then usually there's easy, moderate, and hard. Easy is take the trash out once a week. You know, takes you 4 or 5 minutes and you're done for the week. Then there are some that are intermediate, take a little more effort. Then there are things that have to be done every single day. And oftentimes parents tell kids what their chore is going to be, and the kids don't like the chore, and they resist. But if there are chore lists, the family can talk about the chores, talk about who's going to do them, for how long they're going to do them, and how they're going to get done. So let's take taking care of the dirty dishes after a meal. And when families say, you know, we got to get the dirty dishes taken care of after the meal, how should we do this? We involve the kids in the discussion. Some will say, how about if we each take a day? Mom takes a day, Dad takes a day, Johnny takes a day, Mary takes a day, and Joni takes a day. And then we do it again. That's one way. Another is, how about if we each take a week, and then we're done for 5 weeks, we never have to do it again. And then, you know, they come up with different ways. And then somebody says, yeah, but, you know, I have dance classes on Thursday night. And what if my clean up the kitchen night comes on Thursday and I have to be at dance class? You know, okay, then we got to figure out, well, what do we do when somebody has something that is interfering with their ability to do their chore, kind of thing. You know, is there another way to do this? So when everybody talks about it and brainstorms the different ways of getting it done, and then comes up with a solution, and then it goes on the calendar, the likelihood of kids following through goes up considerably. Because they participated in the decision, they have buy-in. Now, if they think that somebody's not gonna follow through, then the family can talk about, well, what should we do if a night comes and the dishes are not taken care of, and the next morning the dirty dishes are still there? What do you think should happen? And let the kids be involved in discussing what are the consequences of not following through on a responsibility. Kids are harder on each other than parents are when they get to be included. Now, whatever is decided, we do it for a week. We check back in when we have our next meeting to see how that is going, or if we need to look at another way of doing it. Every time with chores, kids may rotate with chores. There's some chores nobody likes to do. Sometimes kids would say, well, I'll vacuum all the time. I love to vacuum, but I don't want to do dishes. If everybody agrees, then that can be their chore. So discussing chores and coming up with them, and then let's say the chores have been divided up and there's still some chores sitting on the list and nobody wants them. Then they're in a position to start saying, well, what are we going to do about these chores nobody wants to do? Should we just let them go, or what should we do about them? You know, and then the kids have to start thinking, don't we all have to do some chores we don't want to do? And figure that one out. Well, you know, if you'll do that chore, I'll do this chore, you know, then there's some working out of those things. So chores can be really helpful. And then,
Sue, excuse me, what happens if the child says, who cares, we don't want to do them anyway, and all 4 kids say that?
they don't want to do them anyway?
Yeah.
Okay. Any chores or just certain ones?
The ones that are left, that no one wants to do.
Okay. Well, if no one wants to do them, then one of the things is the parents can decide if they want to do them or not. Sometimes just letting them go for a week or two can be significant. Or then maybe we have to work out something else. So let's say they don't think it's important to pick up. Mom and Dad say, but I can't stand to live in a mess. So now we need to do some problem solving. And what I suggest is then declare some areas where people can only be if they're willing to pick up. So only if you want to pick up do you use the family room, because that's a common area. People have the right to feel that there's order there. If you want to make a pigsty out of your room, close the door, nobody has to deal with it. But it's not fair to have that in an area where other people have to live with your mess. So we have to have problem solving about how to get that done. You know, kids that won't clean up their dishes. You know, you brainstorm that. Well, should we get paper plates and cups? And everybody throws them away. Another one I use is I say to parents that have kids that they leave their dishes everywhere, I have a simple solution. Say, you go to Target and you get a different colored glass, bowl, and dish for each member of the family. And a knife, fork, and spoon. It's kind of like going to camp. And you have that kit, you know?
Yep.
Or that would be a good one too. Go to the Boy Scout store. Get one of those kits. Put their names on each one. They get one set of dishes. If they want to eat off dirty dishes, be my guest. And you get one of those swishy things, you know, with the soap in it, so everybody that wants clean dishes has to go swish their dishes and put them in the dishwasher. If you don't, next meal comes, you eat off of your dishes. Well, it doesn't take them long, because you know how that food hardens on those plates? You know, they're gonna look at that plate and say, oh yuck, I don't wanna eat off of that. Say, yeah, that's right. So maybe it would be a good idea to clean it. So you'll find some kids will wash the dish and put it in the drainer rather than even put it in the dishwasher. Well, I'm gonna rinse it off anyway, might as well just clean it. Fine, whatever it takes. I tell them to pack up the dishes for a month and give each person a set of dishes. And the dishes don't come back until everybody's trained. So those are the kinds of things you start brainstorming ideas for how do you get this solved, you know, under these circumstances. But you include everybody in that process, in that discussion. And what we want to get across is we have to respect everybody there. Moms and dads need to be treated with respect, and so do the kids. But so, for example, when there's a huge mess in the living area, mom and dad have a right to say, you know, I deserve to be able to come in and sit down in the family space and not have to look at a bunch of dirty clothes and a mess. And so, you know, I want that area to be in order. Now, how we do that, let's discuss it. See? Yes?
So you'd come back when I was talking about my difficult client, I don't know if you remember, the one whose mom is controlling, there's 7 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, and the mom that I'm dealing with, and I was talking about grandma being controlling, you know, I've been with her for 2 or 3 months now, Sue, and the mom is so stuck that every assignment I give her, yep, I can do that, and then I come back the next week and it's just so hard. I just didn't do it, no, life is so hard. And their house is a mess, and she doesn't care. She doesn't care that the kids are eating off a plate that's been used 10 times, and she doesn't care if the kid is peeing in the hallway.
Well, you have to start with something she does really care about. We always want to start with the thing that the person is most motivated to work on. That's the thing that bugs them the most. So for example, when we go through that typical day, and we get through, I ask of all the problems you've mentioned as we went through this typical day, what's the one that bothers you the most? That's what we start with. Because the one that bothers them the most is the one that they're most willing to tackle. And you would probably pick something different, like you'd say, man, they better stop getting the wet diapers all over the place, you know. But to this mom, it might be stopping the fighting. So you focus on the one that is most important to this family. And if everybody is there, you ask everybody, what's the one that bugs you the most? And oftentimes when kids are, they'll say, I don't like the fighting. And they're doing it. You know, but they'll say, I don't like fighting, I don't like fighting. Great, let's work on fighting this week. You know, and let's talk about some things that can be done about fighting. And everybody brainstorms, you know, about that. And once everybody's brainstormed, then you as the therapist can throw in ideas as well. And then they pick the one that they feel they could do for a week. And remember, whatever's decided, do it for a week until they come back to see you, so they know that there's accountability, that it won't last forever, so if it doesn't work, they're coming back to get another idea. If you're seeing the client at the very beginning of the therapy, you might ask them if they would like to have you check in with them a couple times during the week, because we want to be sure that the first thing they pick is something which they'll be successful, because success breeds success. So we want to make sure it's going to be easy enough, simple enough, and something they're most motivated to do, so that they will be successful and they will think, oh, this is great, this is working. I bet you we can solve some of these other things too.
Does that relate to the solution list we made, and you said to have them pick a short-term thing they can be very successful at, plus something that meant the most to them? So in this circumstance,
are you talking about the treatment plan, or what are you talking about?
Remember that day where we had the couple make a list of different solutions, or no?
Problem solving?
Problem solving, was it?
All the possible solutions, and then the ones in order.
Was that what we did when we did long-term, short-term?
No, that's your treatment plan.
Okay.
The 6 steps of problem solving, they brainstormed all the possible.
I'm thinking of the treatment plan then.
Okay.
So if you were with that family, would you pick something for them that you think they could be successful at,
Because if they're not
It would be
working
a
towards-
discussion.
Okay.
And they're gonna be most successful at the thing they're most motivated to change. But you have to be careful and make sure that they're not biting off more than they can chew. You know, if they think, you know, this week we're gonna get something done that you think nobody could accomplish that in a week. You know, keep it, maybe it would be broken down and a piece of it would be done in that week. And so you have to ask yourself, is it reasonable to expect that this could be accomplished in 1 week? And if they are motivated and you can say, yes, it's reasonable to expect somebody could do this in a week, then you get agreement with them. Now, I have made an agreement with somebody about something, and they thought they could do it in a week, and they didn't get it done, but it turned out that it was too big. So we don't, you know, we don't shame them over that. We discuss what made it hard to do that, and discover, you know, it was too much in too short a time, and so then we scale it down to something that's more manageable. And say, okay, let's scale it back here. You know, something that you absolutely 100% can say, no matter what happens, I can do this. And then focus on that. And so that they can feel they can be successful. Okay? So, if it's a form of a family meeting that takes place, and by the way, you can do that right at the end of a typical day if you've got the whole family in your office. So you can have the family practice doing a family meeting right in your office, or you can coach them through this. Then they have to pick a day at a time each week when they could have that meeting in it, so it goes on the schedule. Every week we have our family meeting after we get home from church on Sunday. The other thing, I was mentioning to you the things that should be included in the family meeting. The calendar for sure, possibly the chores, but absolutely planning a fun family time together. Should be part of the meeting, at least at the beginning, and they can come up with a plan that will last for a month, or they can plan. What we want is a plan in place so they have a family fun event after each family meeting. So there's a payoff for coming to this meeting and working together as a family, because we get to do something fun together when it's done. Okay? And so planning fun events, and even if the family has no money to spend, brainstorming things that don't cost anything that the family could do together that would be fun. You know, whether it's bike riding, playing a game, going outside and playing a game outside together as a family, going swimming. You know, there are lots of different activities, and then they have to decide. Sometimes one kid will like that activity, others won't. Well, how can we do this? And the kids will finally figure out, well, how about if we take turns picking what we want to do? And it's all teaching cooperation and responsibility and getting things done, and everybody's helping to keep things moving and keep things working. Families who give allowances, this is also a good time to give out allowances. After they've had the 15-minute meeting for a while, and they've gotten that established, then we add in a problem. Meaning, we say to the family meeting is a place where you can bring up a problem for the family to solve, and anybody in the family can bring up a problem. So, one of the kids comes and says, I want to talk about people taking other people's things without permission. Great, let's talk about that. That is a problem. That's disrespectful to take something that doesn't belong to you without asking permission. And let's talk about what do we think would be a solution? What would be a consequence? So they may all decide that, hey, we should all be able to lock our doors and so nobody can get in, or people are gonna have to forfeit something or pay a price or have a consequence if they do this. It's like, okay, here's one that one family came up with. If a child takes something that belongs to somebody else without permission, then the person they did it to has the right, when they discover this, to get back what they took, but they then have the right to go in and take anything they want of the other child's and keep it for a period of time. And of course, you know what that child's gonna do. You did this to me. I'm gonna find the thing you love the most, the teddy bear you sleep with every night, or something that really matters to you, and it's gonna be mine for the next 2 days. They learn very quickly how there's no payoff in this anymore, kind of thing. Or they learn to negotiate with each other about using each other's things, which is another alternative instead of going and taking things without permission. Okay? So, the family meeting, as I said, you could start that as when kids are 5. Now, obviously, they can't at 5 take the minutes, but maybe a parent and a child together, they can draw pictures of what the decisions are, kind of thing. But even 5-year-olds can have meetings, you know, and they think that's pretty cool. But it's very important that you read the instructions for the family meeting and you really understand them very thoroughly so that you can answer questions. Now, the question they're gonna have is, well, I can tell you right now, Charlie won't come. And he's 15 years old. What are we gonna do about that? And I say, well, here's the deal. You tell the family that it is a choice whether they come or not. But anybody who doesn't come has to abide by the decision of the group. And then it would be a smart idea to decide something that is not to the benefit of the child who didn't come. So, you know, they get stuck with a chore they don't like, or the family's gonna do something they don't wanna do, and when they complain, you say, gee, I'm so sorry you didn't make it to the meeting, because you could have let us know that. But maybe next week you'll be there. And very quickly they decide it's to their benefit to show up because they wanna make sure that people understand their point of view. And it's pretty easy to figure out decisions that, you know, will rankle that one kid because everybody knows him well enough. So that's the way you do it, you know, and kids pretty quickly start coming to the meetings.
So if there is, you know, an older teenager that isn't wanting to come and then just defiant in every.
And then what?
Is defiant in the rules chosen or chores, you know, they just defy to do the chores they are told to do, or, you know.
Well, then you have to have consequences over which the others have control.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, with teenagers, you have to ask, what is their currency? Currency is what matters to them. So you use what matters to them to get compliance. So, okay, if you don't cooperate, we don't cooperate with letting you use the car. You know, if you don't want to cooperate with the family, then the family doesn't have to cooperate with you. So, no car keys. Or you could, you know, for teenagers, cell phones, car keys, computer games. When you get a really defiant person, but you have to be careful with parents, if they go too overboard when they take something, when something is a consequence, and you have to set it up ahead of time. This is a choice, this is a consequence, if you don't comply, this is what's gonna happen. But if they say, okay, if you don't wash the dishes tonight, you get no computer time for the next month. They're out of currency. They've used it up for the whole month. Instead, you help them to understand, start small, take it away for a day, then you can, if it doesn't work, you up it to 2 or 3. And so that you still have that currency to work with. Because if you go too far, you have nothing left to work with. So it's like if kids don't get their homework done because they're on the computer, what's a natural, logical consequence? You don't have the computer till you're done with your homework. And I mean, I literally have parents that put the keyboard in the trunk of the car, you know, so that they can't use the computer until they're done with the homework, kind of thing. So you can use those things for currency with teenagers. But they must know ahead of time what the rule is, or what the choices are, and what the consequences will be, or if it's done to them as a punishment, they didn't know ahead of time, they will go into revenge. And they will make the parents pay.
And how do you, I'm just thinking, I'm at an ALC and a lot of the kids have run away or they've done pretty drastic things in defiance to their parents. How do you help the parents have the courage to continue to implement some of those rules? I'm thinking of a dad who didn't want to take the cell phone away anymore because the kid kept running, and then he wanted to have contact with them if he was running. You know, is that just...
Well, when it's a point of running, you have to first of all find out what are the deeper issues here. You know, and that's the thing, when kids get to be teenagers, there's probably a lot more going on than just simple misbehavior. Now, what's so bad that this kid runs away from home? Now, is it because he gets what he wants every time he runs away? Or are things so bad there that anybody in their right mind would want to run? And so you have to try to get to the, what are the issues? This is a symptom. The running away is a symptom of a lot of deeper issues. And I'd want to talk to the kid, probably privately, because they may not talk about all of it in front of the parents. Say, obviously you're really unhappy at home. You're so unhappy. You'd rather be someplace else. I'd really like to know, what is it at home that is making you so unhappy? Now, it could be a kid who always wants their own way and they're just ticked because they don't get it. It could be the things that are going on, parents that are being abusive or you know, emotionally abusive or physically abusive. Or I've had kids who wanted to run away because they couldn't stand the fighting and screaming and yelling that was going on between mom and dad or mom and the other kids, this kind of thing. And so you really have to get a very, very good picture of family life. Not just focus on the presenting problem. Because oftentimes you will discover the presenting problem is just a symptom of what is really going on in the family. And before you get done, you'll realize that maybe if you solve the problems, the kid won't be running away anymore. It's kind of like the guy who says, you know, the problem is my wife is always angry at me. So get her to stop being angry and we'll be fine. Is that going to solve the problem? What's she angry about? You know, and then she gives you a list of 15 things that her husband's doing that drive her nuts. Well, she's not going to stop being angry until something happens with all these things she's angry about. So that's part of it, you know, when we're dealing with a family, we have to get to the bottom of what is going on. Now, truly a typical day with typical behavior patterns, you look for mistaken beliefs, but if you see pretty dramatic behaviors, you have to do a lot of assessment. Assessing every person in that family and the interrelationships between the members of the family to understand what are all the problems. Part of it may be the goal of misbehavior, but maybe it's a lot of other things going on. Dad's under stress at work. Mom's got post-traumatic stress syndrome. You know, there are a lot of different things going on, so you're gonna be working on a lot of problems at the same time. This is one piece. Kids' misbehavior that's clearly misbehavior for a mistaken goal. But if you're working in-home family, this is just one little piece of the whole pie here. You're gonna find diagnoses, you're gonna find problems between mom and dad, problems between parents and kids, problems with work, problems with friends, problems with family, problems with finances. I mean, all kinds of stuff. This is one thing, one little piece in one corner of your counseling that will help you get a sense of the misbehavior of children and why they do what they do. But it is not the one and only thing that you do with families. You really have to assess and get a really good picture of the family dynamics. I would say to people, my first session at least, and maybe more, is going to be getting to understand what the problems are. That helps them know, you know, we may not solve anything. I try to give them one thing they can do each time before they leave. But first of all, we're going to assess the problem, figure out what is going on, and then we'll talk about some plans for how we're going to get out of this mess. They like that. You know, and I want to know from every member of the family what they think the problems are. What bugs you about what's going on in this family? Even 5-year-olds will tell you. You know? And every piece of information you get helps you to build this picture of this family. And then you're going to have a lot of things to work on, and then you have to start to pull together a short-term, long-term treatment plan. What are we going to work on first? Along with the family, what's most important to you? What do you need to get fixed right now? Sooner the better. What can wait? That's very respectful. You know, you got a lot of problems here. We can't solve them all this week or next week or the week after that. Let's figure out which ones are most important. Which one do you want to focus on first? And we'll focus on those. When those get under control, then we'll move on to some of the others. Okay? Does that make sense?
And that's what I do, so I go into the home, and what, as a therapist, what I find frustrating is because the family is so chaotic, and if I might use the word dysfunctional, they expect miracles overnight. And, you know, I can tell them 100 times, look, this is baby steps. We've now, like you just said, we've now got, you know, you and your 3 kids, and dad's gone, and now we've got you and mom. There's a dilemma there, and now we've got you, and you want to finish school, and because there's no high school education, and now we've got you, and there's a new boyfriend in the picture, and now we've got you in finances, and it's overwhelming even to me. I mean,
Sure.
you know, so whoa, back up the truck, let's start from scratch. But then I find that even if you just give them one little assignment for the week, and you get there the next week, they're like, and it hasn't worked because there's stuff all over the place, and, you know, I still haven't, you know, found the solution to my finances, and mom's still down my throat, and it's like, whoa, and they do expect, you have to watch your client's expectations of yourself as a client, as a
Sure.
therapist, because
And
they
you
do
have to
expect miracles.
With people like that, you have to say, how long has it taken you to make up, to create this mess?
There you go, yeah.
You know, and they say, well, you know, it's been over 15 years. Say, well, what you've created in 15 years is not gonna get fixed in 1 week.
Right, that's good.
You know, if you'd come to me 14 and a half years ago, it would have been real quick. But you waited 15 years, so now we got 15 years worth of problems. So we're gonna have to focus on one thing at a time. And one of the things you have to explore with them when talking about what they want to tackle first is, with the chaos that you're living in right now, what do you think you could handle this week, and how are you gonna remember? People living in chaos can't remember.
Right.
And so, and this is another great strategy that I learned with working with ADHD people. If there's something that they want to remember to do, then help them to figure out how they're gonna post it. Colored Post-it notes with little, you don't have to write it out the words if they don't want the kids to know. They can use initials. And I say stick one on your bathroom mirror, one on the refrigerator door, you know, stick it different places to remind yourself, you know, before the day is over, I want to do this. And if you have enough reminders around, you'll find the 5 minutes you need. But if a lot of these people are like abstract random, and if there's no plan, it never happens. You know, and my favorite statement, if you don't know where you're going, you probably end up someplace else. So if you want to implement something, there has to be a plan. When are you going to implement it? How are you going to implement it? And how are you going to remember to implement it? And then maybe even have check-ins, because if you check in with them every day or two, and they know you're going to check in, that helps to keep them accountable. Oh my gosh, you know, Kristen's going to call me tomorrow. Have I been doing what she told me, you know, what we agreed on? Oh gosh, I better get that done because she's going to call me. I want to be able to tell her I did it, you know. So at the beginning, at least, oftentimes, just having a little phone check-in for a couple minutes can make a big difference. And I have people who even tell me, I have problems with accountability. It would really help me if you do that. You know, because then it reminds me I gotta stay on task, I gotta get this done. And they're very, very busy people. Sometimes your solution is, what can we cut out? There's a statement for ADHD families. Simplify, simplify, simplify. And I start saying, okay, let's eliminate anything that you don't absolutely need. I have them pack up everything they don't need around the house, so it's one less thing to keep organized. You know, what can you do without? They got too many activities. Pick one. You know, stop having so many activities that you can't manage your life. That kind of thing. Or work out carpools so that you only have to drive kids once a week. You know, that kind of thing. People have too much complexity in their life and they cannot handle it all. They're overwhelmed. So we need to help them to get it down to something that's manageable. I listen to some of these families and I think, my gosh, how do you do this? You know, moms that are in the car, chauffeuring kids around from 4 in the afternoon until 8 o'clock at night. They never eat a meal together as a family because they're never home, kind of thing. And sometimes it's just beginning to tell families, you know, how's this working for you? And why do you know, do you think life's going to end for these kids if they don't have a sport or an activity every single minute of every day for the rest of their growing up years? How many of these kids end up in these sports? They don't even get into them when they're in high school.
Because they're tired by then.
Yeah, they're burned out. A lot of these kids that have real talents are burned out by high school because they pushed them too hard in this stuff. You know? So, you know, there's a combination of things that you're going to be working on. That's the caution I have to give you. When I give you a technique, it's not the technique. You know, you're going to use a lot of things. I'm giving a few that you can always fall back on, but you got to add these other things to it. You've got to look at the whole picture. You've got to figure out everything that's going on, and you're going to work on a lot of different things. And so, you know, you're going to be using combinations of a variety of techniques when you're working with somebody in a therapy session. Okay? All right. Any question about the typical day, family, meeting? And actually, what I'm going to do is we're going to watch the video now. So you can sit back and clear your heads. This is Jim Bitter. Jim Bitter is an Advarian. He's a faculty member. I can't remember what school he's with now. He's changed a few times. Does anybody need a quick bathroom break before we start the video? You want it? 5 minutes? 5-minute video, potty break?
Do you want
Drink
this
break,
off?
whatever you call it, break, and, yeah, please turn it off, thank you.